Well, first of all, thank you all for being here and for hanging in. Your presentations were amazing. I'm so excited about some of these ideas, and I hope you are considering carrying those through no matter what happens today. So I tell you all the time how much I love my job. Part of that is because of you. A big part of that is because of you, and because when I see what you all accomplish, it makes me so proud to have just a little fingerprint on your journey. The other part I love about my job is that I often get to meet these people that I've read about and that I think are kind of like rock stars in entrepreneurship or in business. So today is one of those opportunities. I was so excited for Tyrone to join us. I've read about him over the last couple of years, and he is amazing. His story is unbelievable. The format, I'm going to turn some time over to him because he tells his story best, and then I'm going to rejoin him on the couch. I have a few questions for him, but we'll certainly open it up for questions from you as well. So welcome, Tyrone Poole.
Thank you. I never wear blazers, so this is like a one-off when I have to speak. I know that your butts are tender because we've sat on that for a while. And I apologize for this, but it is tough for me when that many people are sitting on the other side. So if there's any chance that we can squish up in here, I have a 300 slide PowerPoint here. It's all in 0.8 font, so it's going to be super tough to see from back there. But no, if you can make it. I don't do PowerPoint. It's a fireside talk, so I'm just going to talk to you about my experience. My startup was, I appreciate you guys so much. I know you got a little bit left of that. I know I get this green couch over here. I'm excited. So I built a company called One App, all right? And this startup is my road to entrepreneurship is probably one of the most unique that you'll ever hear. It is probably the most challenging thing beyond a doubt, it's the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life was build this company. But it is by far the most exciting thing I've ever done. The company is called One App. Has anybody even heard of the company One App? Oh, thank God. I've been in rooms where it was nobody, and it's just so depressing when you're like, I worked so hard, no one knows about it. Okay, so the company's called One App, and it's a housing app that helps families find housing. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I actually went to school to be a fireman. I had nothing to do with business, and I got injured in the academy, really bad, tore my leg apart, ended up being hospitalized for 9 months with my leg elevated above my heart for 16 out of 24 hours a day. All right, so it was a horrible tear. I won't even go into it how it happened. We just ate. We don't want to go back there. But I ended up losing everything that I owned. So being in the hospital that long, the world continues to move around you. I was evicted from my apartment because I obviously didn't pay my rent. I was in the hospital. My car was repoed from the hospital parking lot. My family helped me put my stuff in a storage unit, but then my storage unit was repossessed because I didn't make any storage unit payments. And when I say the world continues to move, I was in the hospital getting collections added to my credit. And I'm still in the hospital for work that was done 6 months ago that's hitting my credit report. So it was a hard time, but when I got out, I'm the oldest of 8. I'll let you know. I have, my dad died, and him and my mom had 6 kids, and then my aunt was hit by a police car, and that was chasing somebody just randomly, and so her 1 and 3-year-old moved in with us. And so that was before my dad died. So it was 8 of us and 2 1-year-olds and 2 3-year-olds at the exact same time. So I'm 20 years old and I'm in the hospital and I'm out and there was really no place to go back home. I mean, when I say my room was gone the second I moved out, like when I moved on campus, that bed didn't even get cold before somebody else was already in it. So there was nowhere for me to go at that point. And I couch topped for a while and with friends and family, and I ended up being homeless. I ended up having to move into the YMCA homeless shelter. The story behind that is it's a little bit long, so I won't go into it. But basically, I was walking. I couldn't figure out where to go. I was on crutches for a year after I got out of the hospital. It's about 3 months later after I got out, and I ended up going to the Mac stop, and I was so nauseous because I had walked for way too long when I was supposed to have my leg elevated. Ended up throwing up at the Mac stop and almost passing out. And the police came, and they thought I was an alcoholic. So they grabbed me and was like, did you do this? This is private property. I should make you clean this up. And then I explained my story, and I was like, I just lost too much blood. That's why I'm laying on the ground with my leg elevated on the bench. And he took me to the shelter. And he said he'd take me anywhere I wanted to go. I just had nowhere to go, so he took me to the Y. And it's funny because I get to the Y, and the people in the Y don't want me to come into the shelter. They're like, you can't just bring people to the shelter. There's all kinds of pathways that you have to go through to get into a homeless shelter. You just can't show up and ask for a bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so I stood outside the shelter door for a while, and the police officer, I believe it was his sister or somebody who worked there just randomly, they let me in, and they gave me a cot outside of the room where everybody else was sleeping because I didn't go through the standard process. I'm telling you, I didn't sleep one wink. My shirt smelled like vomit, and it was burning my nose, and so I turned it inside out and backwards, and I was one of the worst nights, if not the worst night of my life. And I remember somehow everything I owned in the whole world was in 2 bags next to my cot, and I went from having my own apartment. I graduated 4th out of 72 in my class from the fire science program at PCC. And got into the academy 6 weeks in. Like, I was amazing. And then I am in this spot, and I end up the next morning, 7 o'clock comes, I'm darting out of there because I'm like, I'm not like any of the people in here, right? They're all alcoholics and drug addicts and why other people are homeless, but I'm just random. And that's how I really looked at things back in the day, which is embarrassing today because the shelters are full of people just like I was. But I run into the director named Dale, and she writes me an award letter. First, I tried to leave without talking to her. She basically forced me to. I came in, and I was so embarrassed. I wasn't clean. I smelled myself, and she just was like, she didn't judge me at all, and she was like, you came here last night. I'm the director of the shelter. Let me see what I can do to help. And she wrote me a letter that paid my rent anywhere I wanted to live for 12 months. It was the happiest day of my life. It was a letter that was like, I think $1,200 to any property within the Portland Metro. And so I got this letter in my pocket that's like magic, and I'm about to find me a place today. So I am on cloud 9. I'm on websites. I'm looking, and I find 3 or 4 places that are like my top places, and I go apply to the first one, and I get denied. And I apply to the second one, and I get denied. And then it gets frustrating because I'm like, I've never been denied for a rental property before. Why am I not being approved? And I got all these rental barriers that I'm not quite understanding how it works. So I'm doing things like bringing my transcripts from school, showing how good my grades was. Look at this, like I'm a great person, rent to me, right? And bring in all these other things and doctor bills showing I don't got an eviction because I'm a bad renter. I got an eviction because I was injured. My credit isn't at 500 because I don't pay my bills on time. It's because of this whole thing. But the system is set up to where you can't explain all that. It's just all automated. They pull your background check. You either meet it or you don't. And I got denied everywhere. First I was applying to like my best top places. After a while, I started applying to dumps. I didn't care what it looked like. I was going to the places with yellow carpet and green stoves. It looked like Dr. Seuss's old house. I didn't care. If you will approve me, I will live here. And denied. 3 months go by. 3 months go by. And when I tell people this story, a lot of times they're like, God, you applied for 3 months? The sad part is, when I think back on the worst time of that whole process, it's never the time that I was out there trying to find a place. After a month and ran out of money, I kind of stopped looking. There was probably a month and a half where I woke up every day in the shelter and then went to the day shelter, then went to the night shelter, and I didn't even look for a place. Like, I was just defeated. There was no way for me to find a place to live. I didn't qualify nowhere, and I just couldn't keep borrowing money. So I ended up getting out randomly. So I'll tell you the truth because you guys you won't judge me, but I don't do this pitch when I'm to investors. I am on the max, and I'm living at the Goose Hollow shelter. So you guys know the Goose Hollow Max stop? There's a couple, so at this point I have no money. So fare inspectors are getting on the max. So I'm frustrated because I'm like, God, I'm like 2 stops away and I don't have a fare. So I have to jump off, and I got crutches, so I can't really like run. Like I get off the max, I'm trying to get away so they don't see me and give me a ticket. And that's the only reason I got off the max 2 stops early. So now I'm like, God, I got like 15 blocks to walk back to the shelter. So I'm walking there, and a lady is literally putting a yard sign up inside of like a 9-plex, right? And I'm like, And I have given up on applying to places at this point. I have no money, no way to do it. And I see her putting this yard sign in. Long story short, I applied to this place after I do a walkthrough, and my phone rings the next morning, and I'm sitting here like, here we go. I see this number. She's about to tell me I'm denied. I'm about to sell her. This one is going to happen. And I answered the phone, and she literally said, "You're approved." That was just it. For no reason, I just qualified. And I couldn't believe this. I applied to Dumps, and this was a nicer place. And I just got approved. And I remember going there and being like, "Why did you approve me?" And she was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, sweetie. You just met our screening criteria." And for the first time ever, I understood what screening criteria actually was. And it is a preset algorithm that all these landlords use to determine eligibility to their properties. And I was like, "Can you give me a copy of this?" So she gave me a copy of my criteria, and her criteria, and it literally said, you can have one eviction within a year if you pay a double deposit. And I understood why I wasn't getting 12 months of rent. I was only getting 11 months because they applied one of my months to an additional deposit. They didn't consider credit score. It was amount of accounts and collections, and they didn't consider medical debt or student loans, which meant, because they were like, you can't have more than 5. I was like, I got way more than 5, but not if you don't consider these 2 things. I mean, I literally went through every single bit of their background check and realized that I actually just randomly fit. Do you know the odds of just randomly finding the one that you fit in? And then I had an idea. I had an idea to build a company because I ended up working at the Y. So I moved into the place, and then I worked at the Y for 2.5 years. And during this process, I was on the other side of the table. I'm giving award letters out now. People are coming in, I'm giving them the award letter, and I would hear their story, and while other people there were just here, I've been through all this stuff, and I'm giving you money, and now it's all tears, it's hugs, everybody's so happy. But I understood the reality of it. So I'd ask them questions like, whatever happened at your last place? Oh, I got evicted, and my boyfriend punched holes in the wall, and the police got called all the time, and they finally kicked us out. And when I'm listening to that, because I understand how screening criteria works, I'm not hearing the same thing that other people are hearing. I'm like, God, you have an eviction. I know how many management companies will automatically out the gate say you don't qualify. He punched holes in the wall, you probably owe debt to your previous landlord. I know how hard that is to get a place with that criteria on your record. Oh, your credit's not that great. You had the police come out a lot. That's some non-compliance complaints. I know most management companies will deny you if you had more than 2 of those in the last 24 months, right? So because I understand screening criteria, and I became a junkie, like I literally was collecting everybody's criteria, I had an idea. And my idea was, if I could go out and collect the unique screening criteria of every single management company in Oregon, which we identified to be 389 companies, and then put all of their criteria into one database and allow the renter to pull their background check and filter it against every vacancy in the state at the exact same time, letting you know exactly what properties you qualify for. I pitched it to the city of Portland, and during a competition that was called the Startup PDX Challenge. And it was a competition set up to solve civic solutions, so around energy, around food, around housing, medical, and I pitched in the housing department. And without spending too much time in this, I remember going to this event, and remember, I worked, and I made minimum wage at the Y, okay? I walk into this place, and there are people with matching T-shirts on from their company teams. There's cars in the parking lot wrapped with companies' logos, right? And I'm in here with like a blazer I just bought, and I thought I was doing it big because I had printed out my idea, and I put that little plastic clear cover on top, right? And it was legit at that point for me. And it was hilarious. Randomly, I won the competition. Won the competition at 300 startups. Right. With the idea, and we built it. And it right now, it has 309 management companies on it and 4,000 listings. It is literally the equivalent of spending $200,000 in application fees and going around and applying to properties for 11 years. Done in 30 seconds from your phone. And we put 6,500 people in housing, more than every program in Portland combined last year. One app. So it was the 5th most promising tech startup in the world. out of 3,000 startups put on by Washington, D.C., 1776 and Y Combinator. I won a bunch of awards. I got 40 under 40 last year, which was awesome. So this year. Yeah, I got the Innovation Award. Fast Company named it #1 fastest, most promising company in Portland. Then OEN gave me Entrepreneur of the Year, which was the first African American to get that in all 25 years of the award. It's kind of awesome. So that is from, it's like I said, it's a very unorthodox way to get into business. I had no intentions on building a company. I just felt like I could solve a problem. And that's what we built. So I know there's lots of questions, but I wanted to give you a heads up instead of just jumping into questions and having no idea what my company is. Trying to learn as we go is kind of tough. So that's what we do. Thank you for scooting up, because it's just I didn't feel like projecting back there. But I hope it was worth it, and we're gonna sit down and answer questions. Are we sharing this? Or you got your own?
I'm gonna hope this one works. Oh, nice. So thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your story. It's a really powerful story. You said something. I think you said something about either accidentally winning or that what was the word? Randomly.
Yeah.
It was not random. It's a very powerful story, and it's an incredible business idea. So I do just want to share that I don't think that's random. So let's start from where the business actually got viable, right? From when you got funding to actually start building this app. So where was that in the timeline that you just described?
So I won the Startup PDX Challenge.
Okay.
And the winner got a grant of cash. It was an incubator. But it was the city's incubator. It was their first time ever trying it.
Okay.
So they didn't quite know how to do it at that point, but they put like everything a business would need. They got it comped for the 1 year. So I had a person who did bookkeeping, even though I had no books to keep. I had a person Perkins & Coie, who formed my company that year. I had a whole bunch of stuff like that. It was like everything a business could need, and it had a cash grant, and it had a building. And so Portland had right next to on 2nd and Ash, right next to the Saturday market. It was literally overlooking the Saturday market. They had just restored this building, and the deal for investing in it was that the very top floor, the penthouse, that was 2,300 square feet, was given to the winner of the company that won this for 1 year.
Nice.
And so it was 2,300 square feet, and they expected one of these businesses that was like way further along than I was to win it. And one guy with no team and no experience won the competition. So they were like, okay, well, we gonna have to redo this. So they made it to where they had a mezzanine, so I got to keep the mezzanine by myself. And the whole downstairs, they made hot desks for the top 20. So all the people who lost got to come in and use it. So it was like always used for people were in and out that were the other finalists. And I was like looking down on them, like from my mezzanine part. But that was it came with mentorship, because I had no idea what I was doing. So that mentorship was kind of what helped it get going too.
So let's talk about those early mentors. How was that? So you show up on the first day, you're in the mezzanine, you have this idea, you don't have this business, and your mentors show up. What was kind of that startup process with the mentors like?
So the mentorship was not exactly how I imagined it to be, right? Culturally, the way, and this is where it gets tough, right? I grew up, I'm black, right? Pretty obvious. Most people know this thing, right? And the way we grow up, just as a culture, is just so different. And so when you get into these areas, when people are communicating with you, and you are 100% from your, I didn't have no real interactions with like the real business world. And so when you talk to people and they write you a check or they're invested, you think that they're really invested in you. And so when you hear like I'm investing, you think like, I'm giving you, my heart. I'm giving you. I'm gonna be there with you, right? And in reality, it meant I'm gonna write you a check, right? And it just it changed it because growing up, people around me didn't have money like that. We never was, investing wasn't going in our pockets. It was, I know you got a good idea. I'll walk with you, until we figure out what to do next. And you got these people around you that was your mentors, and you're like, these guys are gonna walk with me. figure this out. And it was really a shock to be like, no, this means something different here. This is like, you're gonna figure this out. And if you have questions, we will spend this much of our time throughout this process answering those questions. So it was like a full on, like, 2 months go by and I felt like I hadn't uncovered nothing. And at the end of this, I have this big award where the mayor's gonna be there and it's supposed to be this launch. And I have this timeline, I got the cash, and no real way. So it really kind of, it pushed me to like uncover how strong I could really be and how smart I really could be to uncover this by myself. But the mentorship was standard. It was as if you went into a incubator and they're like, we have incubator hours. We can talk to you about this if you have questions. But it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, which is like, they was going to sit here next to me every day when I got into this and like show me how to do things. So it was really a self-driven, self-motivated to get through that whole thing.
And it sounds like you had to learn really quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And lots of glass ceilings I had to break through.
Yeah.
Lots of them. I actually went blind at one point. I did.
From the stress.
From the stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so stressed, and I never shared this. I was so stressed out that it had been a couple months, and I felt like I was learning things, and right when I thought I was going in the right direction, I found I was going in the wrong direction, and just all over the place. And I was making meetings with people, and people were like so proud of me and so happy that I had won, and kept reaching out, being like, if you need anything, but I didn't know what I needed. And I ended up getting so stressed that I would get like these migraines, and I would like have to squeeze the middle of my, like right here, and then open my eyes because my vision would get blurry, and then it would like focus again. And then it got so bad that when I was squeezing, I would open my eyes and it would focus and then go back out. And it was so blurry I couldn't drive. Like I had to pull over. And so I would do it until I was like calmed down. And then I ended up going to, that night I was at a house, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. And it had gotten so bad that she was like, just go to bed. And I ended up like, it ended up, I couldn't get it to focus. Like no matter how much I was doing it, it was just blurry. And so I just went to sleep. And I woke up and I was blind in both eyes. Oh, wow. Completely 11.0, like the worst you could have in both eyes. And I went to the doctor, got brain scans, got all these scans, and they were like, we got good news and bad news. I'm like, good news. And they were like, good news is there's nothing wrong with your brain. I was like, thank God I started with the good news. But bad news, we have no idea what's wrong with you. They tested my eyes, my brain, everything. And this lasted for 4 weeks. And then they were like, we did blood tests, and they found that my blood was full of, it's like a byproduct of adrenaline firing off. Yeah, and so they were like, and it was way high in levels. And so they were like, this is what's happening to you. They were like, imagine being in a forest, all right? And then you see a saber-toothed tiger across from you, all right? Right when you spot that saber-toothed tiger and he sees you and he starts moving towards you, your body's gonna fire off adrenaline. And this adrenaline, it does things to your body instantly. Like you lose your peripheral vision, and your depth perception is super sharp, right? Like all your muscle fibers are completely forged. Like you have maximum strength, maximum speed. You don't feel fatigue. You don't even feel pain. Your nervous system cut off. So you can be cut or hurt during this process and it's a fight or flight deal. Your body is built in to help you survive, and it lasts for a few minutes max. That was happening. Average person 2 times a year experienced that. I was doing it 2 to 3 times a day, right? And it's, when people call something your baby, like your business is your baby, it's because if you put enough hours into something, and it's like a fact that if you put enough hours into something, your body will react to it when it's in danger the same way your body reacts to a baby that's in danger, because you've invested that much of yourself into it. And so every time I felt like I wasn't going to get this off the ground, or I was back to square one again, but it's 3 months into it, it would just, my t-shirts were like soaked, like yellow stained under the armpit, and I'm like, my body is set to run, and I'm just sitting in front of a computer, right? And it was killing me. Like it literally made me lose my sight. And the doctor was like, this is what we can do. One of 2 things. I can drug you, and help you use medication. But if you had like your mom passed or something like that, you were getting over it, drugs work because it's just a temporary thing. You're trying to build a business, and he was like, I think you should learn how to cope with it. And I was like, I think that's a good idea.
I would agree.
So I ended up seeing a psychiatrist every Thursday for a year throughout the entire plan. And it was, I mean, this is building a business. It's the great thing to do, but I'm understanding everybody's gonna have their own glass ceilings. And I was breaking through them so quickly. I mean, I went from a homeless shelter to working in a shelter, making minimum wage, to the 5th most promising tech startup in the world, and all these things. I mean, that glass ceilings were so fast, right? And I went to him, and he identified these things that I had, and he verified, I forget what it was called, what I had, but then he gave me other things. He said I had imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys
Anyone familiar with that? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's he said it was one of the worst cases he's ever seen. That it's when you don't believe. Every day I went to work, I felt like at some point they were gonna learn that I wasn't the guy who could actually accomplish this, and it was like all a ruse, right? And that I'm just trying to make it happen, but in reality, I actually don't have any skills, right? And that's what I was so terrified about. And I had to do words of affirmation every single morning. I had to look in the mirror and tell myself that nobody was more qualified to solve this problem, and that I am brilliant, I'm smart, I'm talented, I'm gifted. And I had a speech that I used to memorize to give to myself. And it was literally reprogramming my brain to get through this next level of this glass ceiling. I mean, it was, I had imposter syndrome. I had this thing where he said I always wear a mask and I need to take it off. Because when I was in meetings, I didn't want people to know that I didn't quite know what we were talking about. And so I would agree to things and be like, okay, I'll work on that, I'll work on that. And then try to learn it when it was over. And then it was I got to me, it's like, I'm not sure what we're talking about here. And literally had to get them to educate me on the thing. I mean, I went through a lot to get to a point where I could actually be productive, but we did launch noatfee.com at the time, on time, like I was supposed to. After that 1 year, the prototype did go out, so. It was a lot. I know that was a lot to your question.
No. Thank you for being so authentic and vulnerable, by the way. That's really appreciated. Thank you. So let's talk about what happened when you launched. So you launched your business. So let's talk about that launch, and let's talk about kind of how it's evolved since then.
So this is going to kill you. We launched one app, right? I mean, when I say I wrote an algorithm that got published, all right? It's called Poole's Theory of Housing Accessibility. And it literally was I wrote this formula that just said, and it looks fancy when you look at it, because I was good at math, but if you actually understand it, it's really simple. All it said was, the amount of time and effort required for a person to find a place is all dependent on what percentage of the market they qualify for, right? And so if you qualify, when I got to the hospital, I qualified for probably 1% of housing. That's 10 out of 1,000 units, right? So you can use a standard probability equation to determine the likelihood of hitting one of those needle in a haystack just by guessing and going $50, right? And so that's the first part of the equation. The second part, you have to take into consideration how much time and money the family has. If the amount of time or money required exceeds what the family has, so a person come in and got $100, but their background check show it's going to take them 30 attempts, then the housing search is going to result in failure. It's not because they're not good renters, just basic math, right? And so that part of the equation I still believe is true. But the other part is that if I showed people exactly where they qualified, then I'm reducing the amount of time and money it takes to zero, because it's free, and I showed you everywhere you qualify. So now, no matter what, you always are going to be successful, because the equation, you always have more money than required, right? Because you see everywhere. So that was my whole theory, and that's what got funded. I went live, and what do you think happens when people can see everything they qualify for when they're looking for a place? What would you think would happen? That's exactly what happens. They apply for the properties they don't qualify for. This killed my entire, I was telling people that if they could see where they qualified, they would just go where they qualified. In the market without renters, on average, 30% of people are denied, right? And on one app, 35% of all people's applications, they were applying intentionally to deny properties. And you're like, how is this happening? You know, like, are these people all retarded? Like, that's what I was thinking. And it was, so we did a survey. I was like, I gotta figure out what's going on here. And I reached out to people, and I found, we brought people into the office. First thing is people have community, all right? They have their schools, they have their jobs, they have their kids' schools, they have their churches, they have their family, their daycare, and it doesn't matter how many green pins are in Gresham, Beaverton, Tigard, if they live in Vancouver, all right? Those other pins don't matter. So you gotta eliminate all pins outside of where they want to live, right, in the area. And then when you're in that area, it's reduced at that point, obviously. But even when you look in that area, people have their own preferences of what they want in a place. This last weekend that went by, I had a lady come in who is a person who needed help with housing. And we used her as a tester, because we always test the platform when we roll out new products. And she came in, and she's like, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom in this area. I'm like, there's a 3-bedroom right here, and it has the square footage you need, and it has all the stuff, and you're approved. And she's like, oh, let me see. And then she's like, oh, I saw that one, because we send out emails based on your preferences. She's like, I got an email when that came available yesterday. And I was like, what's wrong with it? She was like, the bedrooms are blue. I was like, okay. She's like, I have 2 daughters. That is enough to get somebody to not apply a $100 can of paint. Is enough for people to not apply. When I say nothing happened when one app went out, I mean nothing happened when one app went out. And it was the most terrifying. When you want something to work, we got 4.8 stars, right? From property management companies, from renters. Like, it is everybody's favorite app to find housing. At the same time, no one's using it the way you imagine them using it. And so then you're like, we're supposed to monetize this thing. And my value proposition was, I'm gonna send you pre-screened, pre-approved renters. Why post on Craigslist and get junk when you can get pre-screened, pre-approved renters gift wrapped from me? Pay me more overpaying apartments.com, or all these people just send you random people, right? And I send you random people, like, that don't qualify. I have no difference in my leads than these other ones. So I lost my entire competitive advantage, and I didn't know how to monetize the platform. And this is where it gets tricky for entrepreneurs, because you will hit points where and I'm assuming people in this business school have some intent on being an entrepreneur at some point. So I'm talking to everybody who is actually thinking about being an entrepreneur. You will hit points where everything you imagine does not happen. I mean, worst case, you know how hard it is to take $2 million and build a platform that has no impact on what people do? Seriously, it is the hardest thing to come back and say, but you have to create a narrative and you have to have a plan, right? And we're like, everybody's expecting us to monetize this thing and make a fortune, right? We got 309 companies to participate. That is nobody's even close to the size of one app in Oregon, right? No other website you go to. And I'm trying to figure out how to make a penny off of this. And then the idea was, okay, I've learned that I cannot affect human behavior. People are not going to apply where they qualify. They're going to apply to where they want to live. So we're going to figure out how to get people to live where they want to live. And we added products. We created a marketplace that every time you click on a property and you don't qualify, it tells you why. This property says no more than 5 accounts and collections. You have 7. You must pay off 2 accounts. Here's all 7 of your accounts and collections, the dollar amount you owe, and the phone number call based on your credit report. That's on the site already, all right? And we're like, you still are going to apply here knowing you don't qualify? We're going to show you how to get into this place. So we start building products in the marketplace. And it's literally like having a housing advocate sit right next to you. The first product we found, because we got all the data, we know why every person got denied. First product, we said, okay, we're going to build a cosigner product. A cosigner, 71% of all the applications on one app last year would have passed if they had a cosigner. No bigger impact, right? And cosigner is like the silver bullet in housing. Oh, I mean, your mom, if she got good credit, she can get you in pretty much anywhere unless you like are a criminal, right? And so we were like, we're gonna build our own cosigner product. And I reached out and I said, I'm gonna raise money because this apartment complex is never gonna pay me $250 a month for my current platform. So we're gonna build a full renter facing, and now you click on the property, it tells you, you don't qualify. You can apply, but you're not gonna get approved. So this is what you're gonna happen. We're gonna offer this co-signing product, and it's a one-time fee, and we'll get on the lease with you. And if you default, we cover the rent until they find a new place. So the property will rent to you now. And the properties have accepted to not charge a deposit. So basically the deposit is 1 month's rent. Instead, now you pay a one-time co-signer fee with no deposit. And so it's still 1 month's rent. So instead of refundable, it's non-refundable. That's basically the only impact to the person. But now we get to co-sign for thousands of people and get people in the properties they want to live in. And because 35% of all of the co-sign goes into a bond, we are able to cover all defaults. Yesterday we just did co-sign for another family. $12.95 was their co-sign fee, which was their deposit, and we made $800 off the renter while getting them into the place that they were dying to live in, right? And $800, that's 4 months of what that property would have had to pay me, and that was the third co-sign in the last month from that one property. So you're looking like, you turn the worst case scenario, we add another product that takes your rental history and puts on your credit report, which most people don't realize that property manager, or that TransUnion, Equifax, those guys, they don't know the difference between rent and mortgage. It's just not set up that way. So we right when your rental history comes back from previous landlord, we're like, hey, if we put this on your credit, it'll boost your score by 62 points. We'll do it right now for $39. And bam, you find a place that you deny because your credit score is 580, they require 600. I can boost you for $39 to 615 though. And then you boost it, now you qualify. Like literally building tools in the marketplace to get people into housing, and that was the new model. I pitched it and we were able to raise another $1.5 million to get to the next level. So when I say pivoting, and it is like, how do you stay alive? Entrepreneurship is not about having a great idea. I know a lot of people think you have a good idea, you change the world. It is about figuring out how to get out of these times where everything you imagined was going to happen does not go that way. And how resilient you can be, how you can get back to the drawing board and say, okay, I would have never saw this happening, but now that this is the mistake a lot of people make. They don't pivot. They sit there and they're like, I want this to be true so badly that this is how things work, that I will find a way to make this narrative work, or I will beat a dead horse into the ground. But for me, I was quick to be like, oh yeah, this ain't gonna work. I'm gonna have to tweak this real quick, or I'm never gonna be able to raise this next round of funding. And it is tough to go back to investors and be like, yeah, I was wrong the first time, completely. But the second time I'm gonna be right though. Right? That's a hard sell. And but if you got the right team and people who are already like, man, I'm already 2 in, like I'm gonna lose my first 2 or put in some more. It's a good place. So I'm hoping that this helps, because this is like real life, terrifying events where you lose sleep for months. Like I'm talking about 2 hours a night because I cannot sleep, because right now I have no model to go to market with. Yet I got investors expecting me to monetize the platform the first quarter of the next year. I have no plan on how to do that, right? So there are times where you just have to survive to the next round to get there. But not to scare you though. Entrepreneurship is amazing. It is amazing to get into. Just understand that you're gonna have to be pretty resilient if you want to be successful.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. I'm going to peek at Sandra real quick and see how much time I have. I know I want to let the students ask a couple questions, but I also want to have a couple more.
Why don't we go 15 more minutes?
Okay. If that's okay with you?
Questions here.
Oh, I get to ask 2 more before.
Okay.
I'm up here. Come on.
I'll make them fast this time. Real quick.
No. So the first one is: are you happy with where the company is now, and what's next?
I am happy where the company is now. Had you asked me that question 6 months ago, I wouldn't have known how to answer it. So that's how fickle this whole thing is. Right now, I am very excited. We sold that concept went out and it worked. Like, so now I'm like, holy crap, we just built a marketplace and that is first to market ever, any website. I'm happy today. Next is we have identified 12 products that would literally create access to housing for 100% of users. So now we're like, we just have to put all 12 in here, and we will be the first platform that says, you don't qualify here, you need this tool or this tool based on your background check and that property. And if you click on a different property, you need a different tool because that one has different screening criteria, right? So that's the goal, to build this marketplace on one app.
Sounds amazing. So my last question, and then I promise I'll let the students ask questions, is I want to return to kind of what you were talking about mentorship and your first experience with what that meant. Mm-hmm. How has that experience changed how now you approach mentorship? Do you go into that differently than you experienced?
You know, I've been asked what's the hardest part of being an entrepreneur, and it honestly is the loneliness that you have to go through. When you get into those dark places, there's just, and for me, I don't know if it's just magnified because I can't often go back to the people I grew up with because the world that I live in now is so different than the one that I grew up in. I just don't have that. You know, I go to my pastor and I'm stressed about something and he's like, you know, I want to answer, but my only answer is like, how does it make you feel? You know, did you pray on it? And these things aren't bad answers. It's just at that time you really need an answer. And then the people who you're doing business with are doing business so differently than you ever grew up. Like, I'll give you an example, not to take up the 15 minutes. I'll make it quick, all right? This is what so the cosigner product, right? I had to raise money for the bond. And so I'm building this bond so that way we can start, because you can't start with $0. Because the first one might default before you got enough in the fund. So you have to have something in there. And I'm pitching this idea, and I end up raising the money fairly quickly. And so it comes out that this is not an insurance product, but it's so risky that it requires a personal guarantor, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, I've never had to do that before. But I'm like, okay, let's all put our names on this. And they're like, we're not putting our names on that. You can put your name on that. And I'm like, well, they won't do it without a personal guarantor. And they're like, you personally guarantee it. And I'm like, by myself? And they're like, yes. And they were like, matter of fact, now that we know that that's the thing, we need an extra document that shows we are completely absolved from anything whatsoever if we get involved. And so I'm like, okay. And so it makes me feel a certain type of way because I'm like, so if this works, we all get paid. But if it don't work, I'm the only one that takes the hit. And that is so much against the way I grew up, right? When I grew up, it was all money in or I'm not part of it, you know what I mean? And everybody's involved and everybody's name is on the line. When you grow up in this space, so it's messing with my head. And I think about like going back to my people at home and I know that right when I bring it up, they're gonna be like, what? You have to be stupid to sign your name on this and then they get paid, but then you don't. But then in my world, in the business world, they sitting there like, I told Tyrone yes, why is he getting back to me? Did I do something wrong? And you're like, and that confusion, it messes with you so much because you never know what the right thing is. And like I said, my pastor's like, if it makes you feel wrong, go with your gut. And you're like, I don't know if that's the right move though, you know? And so I'm at home living a certain way because I've invested in friends' businesses, right? I make money now. Like I actually make a decent living today. So I can invest in other people's companies. And then I go back and I'm telling them the same thing, like we all in, like if we gonna do this, we gonna grind together. And then on the other hand, I'm writing thank you letters. I'm writing thank you letters to people who believed in me, but told me I'm on my own if I pull this off. Like, and that confusion between like worlds, you feel like you're being used, but you're not. You know, that is what really is hard to get over. And you got to treat this world this way because that's how they operate, right? And then but you could never take that home. And if you make the mistake of starting to treat like my community like they do, then you look uppity and fake and they don't want nothing to do with you. And I've made that mistake to be like, listen, I'm busy, but I can put 10,000 in. And that is where they're like, you know, then I'm gonna just pay your 10,000 back. But if we all win, well, you're not getting this, you know, it don't even make sense to that world. And it's just it's a hard thing to be able to ride the fence on both sides. It's probably one of the most stressful things that I deal with, but I hope that didn't take too much of your time, but I just wanted you guys to understand one of the major things that you just have to deal with the cultural issues.
Well, thank you for answering that. So Jeffrey was doing this, so I'm gonna go to Jeffrey first.
All right.
And then you turn the microphone over to. Whoa. Sorry.
A second ago, you said that one of the reasons you're feeling good is because you have the right team.
Yeah.
And so I was just curious if you could talk about how you put together the right team.
You know, I put together a board, and the board helped me put together the right team. That's really what it is. You get people that you trust, and to be honest, I say I have 80% of the right team. Because when you hire people, you just don't quite know, and you just kind of got to cut them sometimes. And it's something that I can't do because I'm just a wuss, and I can't let anybody go. But I have a board member who does all the let goes for me, right? So literally, like I have an executive assistant that got let go last week, and she was with me for 3 months, and I was like, I'm training her on how to like answer multi-line phones or do this stuff. And her resume was amazing, but in reality, it was just, you just don't know. So having the right team is really, the definition of the right team, this answer questions, is people who are good at things that you are weak in. Right? That is what I would define as the right team. A lot of people make the mistakes of getting a lot of like-minded people, being like, we all work so well together. And then you end up with no innovation, right? So you get people, I mean, I have a programmer who I can never understand, but he's the best, right? I have a sales guy who complains about his commission every single day, but he's the best sales guy there is when it comes to getting management companies on. I mean, you get people who you may not personality-wise click with, but they deliver, right? And they're better than me. Every person is better than me at everything that's their role, right? And I understand that. And when you can like get off the high horse and say, I will defer to you in these areas and empower them to deliver for you, and then they do, you got a good team. That's kind of really what it is.
So thanks for being here. This is really inspirational. And I'm wondering, everything evolves over time. And I'm wondering if you're seeing rental companies evolving their screening criteria because you kind of cracked it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if they like that or not. I'm wondering if they don't, if they're morphing their criteria. And if you've ever considered becoming involved in the regulatory arena for how these criteria are developed.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Management companies, first part, rarely move their criteria. And I did research on this, and I found out that screening criteria, when I was going through my own homeless experience, I thought screening criteria was their version of saying, you can't live here because you're not good enough, right? After my research, I realized that screening criteria is really just a reflection of what management companies are good at and what they're not. And so when they don't approve you for something, what they're really saying is, I have no idea how to mitigate my risk in this area based on you. And so because of that, I have to say you can't live here. Like if you have no rental history and they're used to people who are first-time renters, but they have no way to educate you on how to be successful in renting, then they're like, we can't do this, right? Because you may damage the property because it's your first time. I remember my first time, the whole backyard, I had my barbecue pit way too close to the place because I liked the idea of opening my door but not having to actually go outside to change the meat. And it was my first time, and the whole side of the wall was like wobble from being warped from heat. And they were furious. And I was like, it's my first time, right? I'm a risk. And other companies, though, approve people at their first time, but it's because they do things like they do 90-day inspections on the unit. Well, if I come out every 90 days, I've mitigated my risk of first time. So it's not that they don't want you, it's that they all operate differently, and they don't have the skill set to support some types based on that company. And no company supports everything. That's why it's like that. It took me a while to understand that. I actually wrote that in my latest thing that went to the city of Portland. And I'm part of the regulatory thing. I was just speaking, I don't know if you guys noticed, I was speaking at the city council on the new screening criteria that they want to pass. And it was my job to evaluate the criteria and determine, I had to tell them exactly how much each rule would create access to housing. So if they said, what happens if we change the law that says nobody can be denied for a place that owes a property less than $500? Well, I'm like, the last 10,000 people who owed somebody property, everybody was more than $500 because they just don't take you to collections for less than that. And you would open the market for 1.3% of people. So are you going to create a law that has almost no impact? No. So then they threw that one out the window. And they used my company to bounce every single concept off of. So and they pay me for it, which is great. And it's the only database in the world that you can do that with. So first to market. So hopefully I answered your question. I'm heavily involved in the regulatory piece. And once you understand how screening criteria works, you think of it differently. Yeah. Is that time for, you have.
I don't know if this is like out of scope of what your company does, but have you reduced in Oregon the level of homeless people, or are you mostly just helping people that have kind of like a little bit of financial trouble finding a place? How are you helping people that maybe just don't have a place to go and don't have the resources?
Right, so One App is a tool. First of all, a lot of people will say, oh, One App houses homeless people. One App is a tool that assists in housing homeless people. A lot of programs did a really good job of collecting the resource to help families, and One App takes home-ready families, okay? These are people who have all the pieces they need to be housed. They just can't understand where to go with all of their resources. And so One App is a tool that just identifies that. So we're not a magic wand. We don't just pop up and now the homeless crisis is gone using tech. But we do take home-ready families, and all of the unnecessary homelessness that's caused by the process of trying to identify qualified housing, we remove. So that's what we do. That's awesome. Yes.
You got one more question?
I have a question. You're a super busy guy, and you're doing growing a company very rapidly, and yet you still have time to give back to your community. Can you talk about that a little bit, like how you're giving back?
Yeah, so I would say the number one way I give back to my community, and I do speeches like this, and I try to like help entrepreneurs get going, because I just feel like if you knew what it's like out here, like somebody who's gonna give it to you real, not know like 300 point, not that those are bad, because next time you look at one, don't be like, oh, I don't want to watch this. Like, it's really something. But for me, it's when you can just be real with the people there and just show them, that's giving back. But one of my number one things that I give back, and I made the decision probably less than a month ago, is I decided that that I was going to give back to my community knowledge, which is something that that we're lacking. We just don't have access to information, to knowledge of how things work, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Like a lot of my investors will be like, you have so limited time that you have to make sure it's all worth something. And I'll get people from my community who will be like, hey Tyrone, I want you to know that me and my wife talked and we want to invest $10,000 into your company. And by the way they're saying it, you're like, Jesus, they think this is a big amount of money, right? And like, we want to invest $10,000. And if I was doing it on one way, I would just ignore those emails because I can't take $10,000. Like, I'm doing millions at a time. Like, there's no way 10,000 at this point in the business has any impact, right? But you can't, but I literally will take an hour to communicate with people about why $10,000 is actually more problematic for me to take than it is for me to add in a new person to the cap table and a new investor that has a vote and all of this stuff for $10,000 when I'm raising at 1.5 is not. It has all these negative impacts, and I'll explain it to them to where they have the knowledge. And I do that on everything that I can, even if I'm up till 1 o'clock in the morning talking to people. And it is because I could easily say, I don't have time for that, right? But when I first tried to build One App, the city of Portland gave me the seed funds, but then I had to raise $600,000. And no fund in Portland would give me any money. And my first 30 investors were black men and women. And I raised $600,000 off of solely the black community. And I don't think anybody's ever done that in Portland because it's not organized money. You know, it's all just sitting at different tables with dinner table with people. And because of that, I've decided to give back on every time I do public speaking a lot in it with those groups. And youth. I really like doing it with youth too because I feel like they aren't already too beat up and the dream's still there. Right. Because once you hit a certain age, like entrepreneurship becomes too scary. Right. But at your age now, it's not too scary. It's an adventure. And that is the prime spot. So that's how I get back.
Thanks.